The moment he stopped carrying the world, most people do not realize the exact moment their life becomes heavy. It does not happen all at once. It happens quietly. It happens the day you start fixing problems that are not yours. The day you begin carrying other people's fears. The day you try to force outcomes that were never under your command. And that was the day Daniel felt something break inside him. He was sitting alone in his small apartment, staring at his phone, scrolling through messages he had already read a dozen times. A boss who would not listen. A friend who kept disappointing him. A plan that was falling apart no matter how hard he pushed. Daniel believed effort should guarantee results. He believed if he worked harder, cared more, worried more, life would eventually reward him. But instead, life felt heavier every day. His chest felt tight. His thoughts never rested. Even in silence, his mind argued with the world. Why is this happening to me? Why can't people change? Why won't things go the way they should? That night, exhausted and restless, Daniel remembered a sentence his grandfather once told him. You can work on the world all day, but if you never work on your mind, you will always be tired. His grandfather had been a quiet man. He owned little, but he carried himself like someone unshaken by storms. Daniel never understood that calm until now. Searching for answers, Daniel came across the writings of Napoleon Hill, a man who studied success not as luck, but as a mental discipline. Hill wrote that most suffering is not caused by failure, but by misplaced attachment. Daniel stopped reading for a moment. Misplaced attachment. Hill explained that people suffer when they tie their peace to things they cannot control. Other people. Outcomes. Approval. Timing. Recognition. When those things shift, and they always do, the mind collapses under the weight. Daniel realized something painful. He had attached his happiness to outcomes that were never promised. He expected people to behave a certain way. He expected plans to work because he wanted them to. He expected life to reward effort on his schedule. And when those expectations were not met, he suffered. Napoleon Hill taught that definiteness of purpose must be paired with emotional control. Desire without discipline leads to anxiety. Ambition without detachment leads to exhaustion. Daniel had ambition, but no detachment. That night, something changed. He asked himself a question that would quietly reshape his life. What am I carrying that was never mine to carry? He thought about the opinions he chased, the outcomes he obsessed over, the need to be understood by everyone. None of it was truly his. Hill wrote that the greatest freedom comes when a person learns the difference between effort and attachment. You must act with faith, but release the demand for specific results. Daniel began to understand. Letting go did not mean quitting. It did not mean caring less. It meant choosing peace over control. For the first time, Daniel allowed a thought to settle in his mind. I will do my best, and I will release the rest. This single idea felt lighter than anything he had carried in years. Over the next few days, Daniel began to practice a new mental habit. When something did not go his way, he did not argue with reality. He asked a different question. What is within my control right now? He could not control other people's reactions. He could not control timing. He could not control outcomes. But he could control his response. He could control his effort. He could control his attitude. Napoleon Hill called this self-mastery, the foundation of all success. Without it, wealth collapses. Without it, ambition turns into anxiety. Without it, effort becomes suffering. Daniel noticed something remarkable. The moment he stopped gripping life so tightly, his mind became clearer. His decisions became calmer. His energy returned. He still worked hard. He still cared deeply. But he no longer begged reality to obey him. Hill warned that expectation is often disguised as faith. True faith trusts effort, not outcomes. False faith demands rewards. Daniel saw how often he demanded. He demanded recognition. He demanded certainty. He demanded guarantees. Life offers none of these. And yet, Hill taught that life rewards those who move forward without demanding proof. Letting go was not weakness. It was strength refined. Daniel stopped replaying conversations in his head. Stopped planning arguments that never happened. Stopped worrying about futures that did not exist yet. Instead, he focused on today's actions. Point 1 Honest effort. Point 1 Disciplined choice. Point 1 Calm response. Hill wrote that character is the only possession that cannot be taken from a man. Everything else is borrowed. Daniel finally understood what his grandfather had lived by. When you stop attaching your worth to outcomes, nothing can shake you. Life did not suddenly become easy. Problems still came, loss still visited, but Daniel was no longer owned by events. He had reclaimed authority over his own mind, and in that quiet shift, something powerful was born. Not resignation, not indifference, inner strength. This was only the beginning. In the next part, Daniel would face the greatest test of all. Learning how expectation secretly destroys progress, and how mastering acceptance unlocks momentum, clarity, and unstoppable forward motion. But for now, one truth anchored him. You cannot control everything, but you can stop carrying what is not yours, and that is where freedom begins. Part 2. The stone in the river. Life has a way of testing everyone. Sometimes the challenges are small, almost invisible, slipping past unnoticed. Other times, they arrive all at once, sweeping through your world like a river in flood. Daniel learned this lesson in a way he would never forget. It happened on a morning that seemed ordinary. He had worked tirelessly for weeks on a new project, believing that if he gave it everything, success was guaranteed. He imagined the recognition, the applause, the validation. But by midday, the plan had begun to unravel. A partner withdrew. A deadline shifted. A key detail he had relied on turned out to be false. He felt the familiar weight pressing down on him, the tension in his chest, the relentless whisper in his mind that he had failed, that he had somehow lost control. And then he remembered something Napoleon Hill wrote, something that had first sparked a quiet revolution in his thinking. The person who does not master the mind is mastered by circumstances. Daniel closed his eyes and pictured a river. A strong, flowing river, relentless and unstoppable. All around it, stones rested quietly. Some were small, barely noticeable, while others were massive, immovable. The river surged and roared, carrying everything along in its current, yet the stones remained steady, unaffected by the chaos around them. He realized that he had been trying to be everything in life, to control every turn of the river, to stop the flow. And every effort had drained him. Napoleon Hill often said that success comes not from fighting the currents of life, but from mastering yourself. The river is life, ever-changing and unpredictable. The stone is your mind, your character, your will. You cannot stop the river, but you can choose to be like the stone. Daniel took a deep breath and asked himself a simple question. Am I going to continue to be tossed around by every wave, every twist of fortune, every opinion of others, or am I going to find my center and stand firm? The answer was clear. He could not control the river. He could not control the wind, the people, the outcomes. He could only control himself. For days afterward, Daniel practiced this idea. Each time a challenge arose, instead of reacting with panic or frustration, he paused. He reminded himself that the only thing he truly owned was his response. He chose patience over urgency, reflection over reaction, calm over fear, and slowly, he noticed a change. His energy returned. He no longer felt the constant tension of trying to force outcomes. Decisions became clearer. Problems that once seemed overwhelming no longer had the same power over him. Napoleon Hill taught that the most successful people are not those who control everything outside themselves, but those who maintain inner control. Fortune is fickle. Circumstances are unpredictable. People are inconsistent. But the mind that is disciplined, calm, and focused is unshakable. Daniel realized that he had been chasing what could never belong to him: other people's approval, perfect outcomes, a life that always went according to plan. He had mistaken desire for control, ambition for ownership, and expectations for guarantees. The illusion of control had been a cage of his own making. He remembered Hill's words. A man who cannot control his thoughts cannot control anything else. The river of life would continue to flow, bringing storms, surprises, and losses. Daniel could not stop it. But he could choose how to navigate it. He could remain the stone, grounded in his own character, unshaken by the unpredictable currents. It was not easy. Old habits of worry and fear returned at times, like waves trying to knock him off balance. But each time, he reminded himself, the world will not obey your wishes. People will change, plans will fail, fortune will shift. The only true power lies within. Daniel began to see opportunities in this perspective. Challenges that once paralyzed him now became lessons. Failures were no longer humiliations, but instructions on resilience and strategy. Every disappointment was a chance to practice self-mastery, to strengthen his mind, to grow his inner resources. Napoleon Hill always emphasized that personal power comes from within, from controlling thoughts, emotions, and reactions. Wealth, recognition, and influence are transient, but a mind that remains firm through change is invincible. Daniel understood that being like the stone did not mean being passive or detached from life's ambitions. It meant being disciplined, intentional, and calm. It meant doing everything within his power but releasing attachment to what he could not control. He began each morning with a small ritual. He would visualize the river and the stone. He would remind himself that the world moves as it will. And then he would ask, "What can I control today? What effort can I give? How can I strengthen my mind and character?" The practice transformed his work, his relationships, and his sense of peace. Problems still came, but they no longer controlled him. He still aimed high, still pursued success, but he pursued it with clarity, not desperation. This, Daniel realized, was the true strength Napoleon Hill wrote about. The strength that does not fight the river but endures its current. The strength that does not curse what is lost but remains firm, patient, and unshaken. The strength that masters the self before attempting to master anything else. Daniel's life began to change in subtle but profound ways. He found he could engage more fully, act more decisively, and rest more peacefully. Others noticed it too. Colleagues respected his calm authority. Friends sought his advice. Challenges that once exhausted him now became opportunities for growth and reflection. The greatest lesson he learned was simple but revolutionary: the heaviest burdens are the ones you choose to carry. If you wish to live lighter, you must release what is not yours. You cannot command people, events, or fortune, but you can command yourself. And in that command you find freedom. The stone in the river does not resist, it abides. It does not struggle, it remains. Daniel was learning to be that stone. In the next part, Daniel would face a test that forced him to confront the illusion of control in every area of his life. He would learn how expectations quietly steal energy, and how letting go of them unlocks clarity, momentum, and real inner power. For now, one truth anchored him: control is an inside job. The river moves as it will, but the stone, steady and patient, remains. And in that steadiness, real power and lasting peace are born. If you want, I can continue with part 3 next, where Daniel directly faces the tyranny of expectations and discovers the Napoleon Hill principle of turning setbacks into opportunity, keeping the motivational story style intact. Do you want me to continue with part 3 now? Part 3. The power of response. Daniel had learned to be like the stone in the river. He had begun to see the value of inner control, of releasing what was not his to carry. But there was a new lesson waiting for him, one that would test him more than any storm or disappointment he had faced. It began one morning with a single email. A colleague had betrayed a promise, causing a project Daniel had poured his heart into to stumble. Instantly, he felt the old familiar surge of anger, frustration, and panic. His mind raced with complaints, what-ifs, and blame. For a moment, Daniel felt himself being swept into the river again, carried by the current of reaction. Then he remembered something he had read from Napoleon Hill about the most successful people in history. They were not the ones who avoided difficulty. They were the ones who learned to pause, to consider, to choose their response. A small space exists between what happens and how you react, Hill wrote. Most people never see it. They leap without thinking. They respond with raw emotion. But the space is where power lives. The space is where you reclaim yourself. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He imagined that invisible moment, that space where choice could occur. The anger bubbled, but he did not act on it. He asked himself a simple question: is this in my control? It was not. He could not control his colleagues' actions. He could not control how others would perceive the outcome. He could not reverse what had been done, but he could control himself. He could control his reaction. In that instant, Daniel realized the essence of true power. Napoleon Hill had written that mastery of the mind is the foundation of all success. Everything else is fleeting. Recognition, wealth, influence, these are given and taken by chance. Only control of your own thoughts, your own actions, your own emotions, is permanent. He chose to respond instead of react. His voice remained calm when he addressed the issue. He offered solutions instead of complaints. He focused on what could be done, rather than what had gone wrong. The effect was immediate. Tension left his body. Clarity returned to his mind. Doors opened that would have been slammed shut if he had allowed anger and frustration to dictate his behavior. Daniel began to understand that most of life's destructive emotions, anger, envy, fear, were rooted in the same mistake, trying to control what could not be controlled. Anger erupted when others did not act as we expected. Envy appeared when we compared ourselves to someone else. Fear took hold when we clung to what we could never guarantee. He remembered the words of Marcus Aurelius. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Daniel saw it clearly. Anger, fear, frustration, disappointment, they are all stories we tell ourselves. They are the result of our own misjudgments, not the actions of others. The wise, Napoleon Hill explained, do not waste energy battling reality. They conserve it for building character, for taking disciplined action, for pursuing purpose. Every battle with destructive emotion is a wasted battle unless it leads to self-mastery. From that day, Daniel began practicing a new discipline. Each morning, he reminded himself that the world would not obey his wishes. Storms would come. People would disappoint. Fortune would rise and fall. But he could meet each moment with calm. He could pause, ask himself what was within his control, and choose his response. It was not easy. Old habits of knee-jerk reaction returned often. A sharp word from a colleague, a sudden obstacle, a perceived insult, all could trigger the old responses. But each time, he noticed the space between stimulus and reaction. Each time, he trained himself to act with reason and clarity rather than emotion. Napoleon Hill had emphasized that successful people are not immune to difficulty. They simply respond differently. They meet the same challenges as everyone else but choose the path of control over chaos, calm over panic, thoughtful action over blind reaction. Daniel began to see the practical effects. Relationships improved because he no longer lashed out or sought revenge. Decisions became clearer because he was not clouded by emotional reaction. His energy, once scattered by every disturbance, became focused and productive. He also began to understand fear. Fear, he realized, is simply the anticipation of loss. It grows when we cling to outcomes, when we imagine that our happiness depends on things outside our control. By choosing to act without attachment to results, he discovered fear shrank. Anxiety faded. Peace grew. Envy, too, began to lose its grip. By focusing on his own effort and growth, he no longer compared himself to others. He measured his progress by his own standards, not by the shifting success of those around him. Anger, once a wildfire inside him, became a tool for reflection. When it appeared, he asked, "What expectation am I holding that is being violated? What attachment am I still clinging to?" Every eruption of emotion became a signpost pointing him back to self-mastery. This, Daniel realized, was the art of life Napoleon Hill spoke of. Life will never stop presenting challenges. The world will not bend to our desires. People will disappoint. Fortune will shift. Circumstances will test patience, integrity, and perseverance. But within that, there is a choice. React and be consumed. Respond and be empowered. The difference is subtle, almost invisible, but it is the dividing line between chaos and calm, between being a victim of circumstance and a master of your life. Daniel practiced this every day. He imagined the space between stimulus and response like a pause button. He visualized it as a shield, a small fortress inside him where he could retreat to consider, reflect, and act with clarity. Slowly, the effect spread into every part of his life. He approached meetings with calm authority. He handled conflicts with patience. He pursued goals without being consumed by them. The river still flowed around him, but he was no longer swept away. He remembered Napoleon Hill's words. A man who cannot control his thoughts cannot control anything else. This was not just theory. It was a living practice. Every time he chose to respond instead of react, he strengthened his mind. Every time he paused instead of leaping into emotion, he expanded his power. Daniel began to see the final truth. The only battle that matters is the one within. The world is neutral. Fortune is impartial. The storms are indifferent. All that matters is how he meets them, and in that realization, a profound freedom began to take root. He could not change the river, but he could be the stone. He could not control the world, but he could control himself. He could not stop misfortune, but he could refuse to be undone by it. Strength was no longer measured by what he conquered outside. It was measured by what he mastered within. The real crown, Napoleon Hill taught, is the mastery of your mind, your character, your choice. Daniel had found the first step of this crown. The next part of his journey would test him with expectations, those invisible chains we place on ourselves. He would learn that most suffering comes not from life itself, but from the insistence that life bend to our will. And he would discover the art of turning unmet expectations into clarity, growth, and unstoppable forward motion. For now, he rested in a simple truth: in every moment, he could respond, not react. In every challenge, he could reclaim his power. And in that practice, he was already beginning to become unconquerable. If you like, I can continue with part 4, where Daniel faces the tyranny of expectations and learns Napoleon Hill's principle of converting setbacks into fuel for success and clarity. Do you want me to continue with part 4 now? Part 4, turning expectations into power. The morning sunlight streamed through Daniel's window, but he hardly noticed it. He had been thinking about the promise of success and the frustration of unmet expectations. Just days ago, he had believed he could control the outcomes of every plan, every effort. He had thought that hard work guaranteed reward, that loyalty would be reciprocated, and that effort alone could bend the world to his will. Then reality hit. A long-planned project collapsed when a partner failed to deliver. An opportunity he had counted on vanished without warning. Praise he had hoped for was replaced by criticism. Daniel felt that familiar ache of disappointment, the weight of expectations gone unmet. But this time, something had changed. He did not react with anger or despair. Instead, he remembered Napoleon Hill's teachings about the secret behind every great achievement. Setbacks are fuel, and expectations are lessons disguised as trials. He closed his eyes and pictured the river again, flowing endlessly, carrying everything in its path. Yet he, like the stone he had imagined before, could remain firm. The river could rise, storms could batter, people could betray, but none of that could touch the calm he cultivated within. Daniel realized the core of the problem. Expectations are like invisible chains we forge ourselves. Every time he demanded the world to behave as he wished, he created suffering. Every time he attached his happiness to outcomes outside his control, he set himself up for frustration. Napoleon Hill had written that desire, when combined with definite purpose and clear focus, becomes the starting point for all success. But desire combined with attachment to specific results can become a source of pain. Daniel saw that clearly now. He decided to change his approach. Instead of demanding that life deliver exactly what he imagined, he would focus on giving his best effort in each situation and then releasing attachment to the results. He would treat setbacks not as failures, but as messages guiding him toward improvement. That day, Daniel faced his first real test. A client rejected his proposal, citing reasons that seemed arbitrary. The old Daniel would have raged or obsessed over what went wrong. But the new Daniel paused. He asked himself, "What is in my control here? What can I learn?" He wrote down the client's objections, studied them, and identified ways to improve his approach next time. In that moment, he felt a surprising lightness. He was no longer tied to the disappointment. He had transformed it into a tool for growth. Napoleon Hill emphasized that every adversity contains the seed of equal or greater benefit. Daniel began to see this in real time. Every upset, every failed expectation, was an opportunity to strengthen his mind, sharpen his skills, and deepen his patience. He also noticed the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting would have meant giving in to frustration, allowing the event to control him. Responding meant observing, analyzing, and acting with intention. This small choice created a ripple effect in everything he did. Daniel started to apply this principle to every area of life. When friends or colleagues disappointed him, he looked for lessons instead of harboring resentment. When plans went awry, he asked, "What now? How can I adapt and improve?" He learned that the question, "Why me?" leads to bitterness, but "What now?" leads to action, growth, and resilience. He also began to recognize the hidden danger of silent expectations. Often, expectations are unspoken rules we impose on the world. We think, "This person should act this way," or "This opportunity should turn out like this." Each time the world fails to follow our script, disappointment arises. Daniel resolved to replace these hidden demands with acceptance. He would aim high, give his best, and trust the process. He would measure success not by what life handed him, but by the strength, clarity, and character he demonstrated along the way. Napoleon Hill wrote about the importance of definiteness of purpose. Daniel realized that aligning effort with purpose, rather than with specific outcomes, was the key. The river of life would always move unpredictably, but the stone could remain steadfast. The purpose, not the results, anchored him. Within weeks, Daniel noticed a remarkable change. Opportunities still arose and disappeared, but he no longer wasted energy in regret or frustration. People still disappointed him, but he responded with clarity and calm. His work improved, not because the world obeyed him, but because he was no longer distracted by resentment or panic. Even personal relationships began to thrive. Friends and family noticed a new patience, a new steadiness. Daniel's words were measured, his emotions controlled, his presence calm. People were drawn to his confidence because it came from genuine mastery of self, not from force or manipulation. One evening, as he reflected on the day, Daniel realized the final lesson of expectation. Suffering does not come from what happens to us. It comes from our insistence that life follow a script we imagine. The moment we release that insistence, disappointment transforms into wisdom. Every setback becomes a teacher, every failed expectation a guide to deeper understanding. Napoleon Hill taught that true success comes from persistence, self-discipline, and the ability to turn adversity into advantage. Daniel understood now that the ability to meet life with calm, to respond instead of react, to release attachment to outcomes, was itself a form of success, a success that could never be stolen, lost, or undone by circumstance. That night, Daniel made a promise to himself. He would continue to set goals, pursue dreams, and work hard, but he would do so with detachment from results. He would meet every disappointment with curiosity, every betrayal with understanding, and every failure with resilience. He understood something even deeper. The mind that has mastered expectation is unshakable. It is free from the tyranny of hope and fear, from the endless cycle of desire and disappointment. It sees life clearly, acts decisively, and maintains calm regardless of fortune's whim. From that day forward, Daniel carried a simple mantra: I do my best, and I release the rest. It reminded him that control belongs only to what is within his mind and character. Everything else flows like the river, and he remains the stone, steadfast, strong, and calm. The lessons of expectation were not easy, and Daniel knew more challenges would come. Yet for the first time, he faced the future with genuine confidence. He had learned that disappointment is not a prison, but a teacher. That setbacks are not punishments, but opportunities. And that the power to remain calm and strong is available to anyone willing to master their own mind. The next part of Daniel's journey would teach him how to harness desire, focus, and persistence without being enslaved by impatience or frustration. He would discover the secret Napoleon Hill revealed to every great achiever. The mind that rules itself becomes the master of circumstance. But for now, he rested in the quiet knowledge that the chains of expectation had been loosened. He could meet life as it was, not as he wished it to be. And in that meeting, he discovered something remarkable: real power, real freedom, and a peace that could not be taken from him. If you want, I can continue with part 5, where Daniel learns to combine desire, persistence, and disciplined action to turn obstacles into opportunity, fully embracing Napoleon Hill's success principles. Do you want me to continue with part 5 now? Part 5. Turning obstacles into opportunities. Daniel sat at his desk late one night, staring at the list of goals he had set for himself months ago. Some had been achieved, some delayed, and others seemed farther away than ever. A wave of frustration threatened to sweep over him, but he caught himself in that familiar space, that small pause Napoleon Hill called the secret of self-mastery. He asked himself the question that had become his guiding principle: what is in my control? The answer came clearly: his effort, his focus, his persistence, his attitude. Everything else, the timing, the response of others, fortune, was beyond his grasp. This was the lesson that would shape part 5 of his journey. Success, Daniel realized, was not about avoiding obstacles. It was about turning obstacles into fuel, about transforming challenges into stepping stones. Napoleon Hill had written extensively about this principle, calling it the ability to convert every adversity into advantage. The next morning, An obstacle presented itself immediately. A major client had canceled a contract unexpectedly. Many would have panicked. Many would have allowed anger, fear, or resentment to take over. But Daniel paused. He took a deep breath and asked himself, what opportunity is hidden here? He saw it immediately. The cancellation freed time and energy. It allowed him to refine his strategy, improve his skills, and reach a new audience that he had not previously considered. Instead of mourning what he had lost, he began creating a plan to gain something greater. Napoleon Hill had emphasized that desire combined with persistence forms a magnetic force. Daniel understood now that his desire for achievement was not weakened by setbacks. In fact, setbacks intensified his determination. Each challenge became a test of his focus, his creativity, and his endurance. Over the following weeks, Daniel deliberately sought lessons in every obstacle. A delayed shipment taught him better planning and communication. A colleague's criticism revealed blind spots in his approach. A failed partnership revealed the importance of careful evaluation before commitment. Each setback became a lesson, each failure a teacher. He remembered Hill's words. Every adversity carries with it the seed of equal or greater benefit. The key is to find it. Daniel began writing down each obstacle he faced and listing at least one potential benefit or opportunity hidden within it. Over time, this became a habit, a framework for turning frustration into progress. Daniel also began to notice a subtle change within himself. Where once fear and doubt had slowed him, he now felt a growing confidence. Challenges no longer seemed like threats but as invitations to practice mastery, to demonstrate resilience, and to refine his character. He realized that obstacles are only powerful if we allow them to control us. They can be walls or stepping stones. The difference lies entirely in the mind. Napoleon Hill's teachings had transformed from abstract advice into living strategy. Daniel now met each challenge with curiosity instead of complaint, with action instead of despair. One afternoon, a major opportunity appeared that had seemed impossible just months before. He had spent weeks preparing for it, refining his skills and testing his strategies. And yet, when it arrived, he encountered a new obstacle. A competitor had beaten him to the initial pitch, and the client seemed hesitant. Old Daniel would have panicked, believing that months of effort were wasted. But new Daniel paused, reflected, and asked, "What can I do differently? What value can I bring that no one else has considered?" He created a revised proposal, highlighting unique strengths, demonstrating foresight, and addressing concerns before they were voiced. The client responded with enthusiasm. What had seemed like a closed door became an open one, all because Daniel had refused to react impulsively and had chosen to see opportunity within the obstacle. From that moment, he began to understand another truth Napoleon Hill had taught: persistence is not stubbornness. It is disciplined, intelligent effort that adapts to reality. Persistence is the power to keep moving forward, learning, adjusting, and striving, even when the path is blocked. Daniel also began to recognize the role of attitude. A positive, constructive mindset did not ignore the difficulty of obstacles, but it refused to be defeated by them. He realized that optimism combined with action produces results. Despair combined with inaction produces nothing. He started mentoring younger colleagues, sharing the lessons he had learned about turning setbacks into progress. He showed them that failure is not an enemy but a teacher. That obstacles are not barriers but opportunities for skill, character, and wisdom. Even in personal life, Daniel noticed a difference. Conflicts with friends or family no longer led to bitterness. He sought understanding and solutions rather than dwelling on resentment. Relationships strengthened because he approached them with patience, insight, and calm, not reaction. By now, Daniel had internalized Napoleon Hill's principle that all achievements begin with a clear purpose, supported by focused desire, disciplined effort, and persistence. He had also learned the complementary principle: every obstacle is a necessary part of the path to mastery. There is no true success without challenge. There is no growth without resistance. Each day became a test, and each test became a lesson. Daniel began to see life itself as a laboratory for building character. Every frustration was a chance to practice self-control. Every disappointment was an opportunity to see the hidden advantage. Every setback was a step forward in disguise. He realized something remarkable. The world had not changed. Fortune still fluctuated, people still disappointed, and plans still failed. But he had changed. His perspective had shifted. The power to transform obstacles into opportunity rested not in luck or circumstance, but in the mind. Daniel reflected on the lessons he had learned so far. He had discovered that peace comes from within, that mastery of the self is true power, that expectation is the source of much suffering, and that obstacles are opportunities if seen correctly. Each insight was a step toward the life Napoleon Hill had described, a life of purposeful action, clear thinking, and unshakable inner strength. By the end of the year, Daniel had achieved more than he could have imagined. Not because fortune had favored him, but because he had learned to bend challenges to his advantage. Every obstacle became a stepping stone, every setback a tool, every failure a teacher. He knew that the journey was not over. Life would continue to test him. New obstacles would arise. Fortune would still be unpredictable. People would still disappoint. But he had discovered the key, the mind that masters itself, that responds calmly, that turns every challenge into an opportunity, becomes unstoppable. Daniel closed his journal and smiled. He felt a deep satisfaction that was not dependent on results. It was the satisfaction of knowing that no matter what life delivered, he had the power to turn it into growth, strength, and progress. Napoleon Hill had written that the person who does this consistently will achieve great success, not because the world is kind, but because mastery of self turns every circumstance into advantage. Daniel now lived that truth daily, and he knew the next part of his journey would teach him how to combine desire, faith, and action with this mastery over obstacles, creating not just success, but enduring fulfillment. For now, he rested in one certainty: the obstacles he once feared had become the very tools that made him strong, resilient, and ready for everything life could offer. He had learned the secret Napoleon Hill had spent decades teaching: mastery of the mind transforms every challenge into a ladder to greatness. If you want, I can continue with part 6, the final part, where Daniel fully integrates all the lessons: self-mastery, detachment, response over reaction, and transforming obstacles into unstoppable success and personal fulfillment. Do you want me to continue with part 6 now? Part 6. The mastery of self and the power of fulfillment. The sun rose over the city, golden and warm, as Daniel stood on the rooftop of his office building. He looked out over the streets below, thinking back over the journey that had brought him here. Just a year ago, he had been weighed down by expectations, frustrated by failures, and lost in the chaos of the world. Now, something remarkable had happened. He had discovered the secret Napoleon Hill had written about again and again. The mind that masters itself is the key to unstoppable success. It all began with a single realization: peace, power, and fulfillment were not found in the applause of others, the accumulation of wealth, or the approval of circumstance. They were built from within. The storms of life could rage, the river of fortune could sweep everything away, but the stone, the center of his character, remained steady. Daniel thought about the lessons he had learned. First, he had learned to let go of what was not his to control. Expectations had been his heaviest chains, and releasing them had set him free. Second, he had learned to respond rather than react. In the space between stimulus and action, he discovered power. And third, he had learned to transform obstacles into opportunities, seeing every challenge not as a threat but as a teacher, a ladder to growth and strength. But the final lesson, the one that brought everything together, was the lesson of purpose combined with persistent action. Napoleon Hill had written that every great achievement begins with a burning desire, a clear goal, and the willingness to work relentlessly toward it. Daniel now understood that desire alone was not enough. Without the discipline to control thoughts, emotions, and actions, desire could easily turn into frustration, disappointment, or impatience. He remembered the night he had faced a major setback with a client. It had seemed like failure. But by pausing, reflecting, and asking what opportunity lay hidden, he had turned that moment into a victory. That moment had been a turning point, a demonstration that mastery over the self could convert adversity into advantage. Daniel smiled. He saw that success was not measured by what the world handed him, but by what he did with the circumstances he encountered. Fortune might be fickle, people might disappoint, and plans might fail, but the mind that is disciplined, focused, and unshaken remains unconquerable. He thought of the river and the stone again. Life was the river, constantly moving, unpredictable, and often overwhelming. But the stone, firm, grounded, and unmoved, represented the inner self, strengthened by clarity, choice, and disciplined action. Daniel realized that everything he had achieved, every opportunity he had seized, had come from remaining steadfast in the midst of life's constant change. And now, he was ready for the greatest lesson of all, the integration of desire, faith, action, and resilience into a life of fulfillment. Napoleon Hill had emphasized the power of definite purpose, combined with unwavering faith and consistent action. Daniel now saw that faith was not passive hope but a confident expectation rooted in preparation and self-mastery. He trusted his mind, his choices, and his ability to adapt. In the following weeks, Daniel applied this final principle in every aspect of his life. He approached work with clarity, focusing on goals rather than obstacles. He approached relationships with calm, understanding that the affection of others could not dictate his happiness. He approached every challenge with curiosity, seeking lessons and opportunities hidden within. He began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing the insights he had gained. He told them that failure is not an enemy, that disappointment is not a punishment, and that mastery of the self is the ultimate form of wealth. He showed them that the person who rules their own mind is unshakable, free, and capable of turning any situation to their advantage. One afternoon, a young colleague asked him, "Daniel, how do you stay so calm when everything is uncertain?" Daniel smiled and replied, "It's simple. I focus on what I can control, I learn from every challenge, and I take action with faith, discipline, and persistence. The rest is not mine to command, so I release it." That evening, Daniel reflected on how far he had come. He remembered the man who had once allowed fear, envy, and frustration to dominate his life. That man had been a prisoner of expectation, constantly at the mercy of circumstances. The new Daniel had mastered the art of inner freedom, turning life's currents to his advantage, and finding true fulfillment along the way. Napoleon Hill had taught that real success is not only about wealth or recognition. It is about character, self-mastery, and the ability to rise above setbacks, fear, and distraction. Daniel now embodied this truth. He had discovered that power lies not in controlling others but in mastering oneself. He had learned that happiness comes not from possession or approval but from clarity, purpose, and disciplined action. In the quiet of the night, Daniel made a promise to himself and to anyone who would listen. He would continue to act with purpose, to respond instead of react, to turn obstacles into opportunities, and to cultivate the inner strength that cannot be shaken by fortune, failure, or fleeting applause. He understood that life would continue to test him, but he was prepared. He realized one final, liberating truth: peace and fulfillment are not external treasures to be won. They are built moment by moment, choice by choice, through the mastery of the mind. The mind that is disciplined, focused, and resilient is a fortress no storm can destroy. The river of life may rage, but the stone of character remains firm. As Daniel gazed at the stars above, he knew this journey was not an endpoint, but a living practice. Mastery is continuous, growth is endless, and every day is an opportunity to apply the principles that Napoleon Hill had shared with the world: desire, purpose, faith, persistence, self-discipline, and the ability to turn obstacles into advantage. With a calm heart and unwavering resolve, Daniel smiled. He had become unshakable, unstoppable, and free. He had mastered himself, and in doing so, he had discovered the ultimate secret to a life of success, happiness, and fulfillment. And now, as you read this story, remember this lesson: the power to achieve your dreams is not in luck, in wealth, or in approval. It is in mastering your mind, responding with clarity, embracing every challenge, and pursuing your definite purpose with persistence, faith, and discipline. Your success begins within. If you are ready to transform your life, take the first step today. Apply these lessons, practice self-mastery, and turn every obstacle into an opportunity. Your journey to unstoppable success starts now. Call to action. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe for more motivational stories, share it with friends who need encouragement, and leave a comment about which lesson you will apply first. Your journey to mastering yourself begins with a single choice.